Alrighty, I'd say we're all set. So thank you so much for joining Magically Live, where today we'll be discussing ARIA, Simple Steps for Better Digital Learning. For those of you who don't know, Magically Live is a series of events in which we host that we pick one accessibility topic each time and take a deep dive into it. My name is ARIA11y. I'm a CPAC certified accessibility consultant here at Magic EdTech, and today I'm joined by Tarveen and Vipul. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
Sure. Hi, everyone. This is Tarveen. I'm Director of Accessibility at Magic, and I'm BAS and CPCC certified. Thank you so much for joining the session. Over to you, Vipul.
Yeah, thank you, Tarveen. Hello, everyone. Myself, Vipul. I'll be heading out the instructions and everything for this presentation, and I'm the accessibility consultant here. I'm skilled in identifying accessibility issues. So it's happy to join everyone on the call. Let's move forward.
Perfect. Just some housekeeping before we begin. Please use the question and answer box to submit any questions that you may have. We'll go over the content that we have for the first little bit, and then we'll go into the question and answer section. Closed captions are enabled. To see them, please hit the CC button at the bottom of your screen. And the session is being recorded, and we'll share out the recording to all of the registrants. Alrighty, we'll go into our agenda for the day. Oh, well, here's a little slide about us. So again, we have Tarveen, myself, and Vipul.
Moving on to next slide.
Alrighty, so our agenda for the day, first we'll go over an introduction, then we'll talk about ARIA, states, roles, and properties, and then we'll talk about when to use ARIA and top 6 mistakes to avoid when using ARIA, and then we'll go into our Q&A afterwards. ARIA is not just about adding roles and attributes, it's about creating an exclusive experience for all users. And I believe we have a poll for you. All right, so the poll reads, how would you rate your proficiency in ARIA, accessible rich internet applications? Your first option is beginner, your second option is intermediate, your third option is advanced, and your fourth option is expert. Give you a minute to go ahead and answer that.
It's just the reason we have added this as a poll question before we start to understand what is the expertise level of people who are there in the audience, so that we can cover the elements in detail, whatever depth is required in these subsequent slides.
All righty, it looks like we have a fair amount of beginners, some intermediate, and some advanced.
Let's start with what is ARIA. We all know that we have talked about it, we have heard about it, and there's a good long list of pages and information on W3C website. So what is ARIA? ARIA is actually accessible rich internet application. It helps to enhance the user experience, especially for a screen reader user, when they are implemented and done right on HTML. First of all, we need to understand that we don't need to learn all ARIA. We don't need to implement all ARIA. We just need to have right ARIA implemented at right place. No one asks you to ensure that every element, every interactive element needs to have ARIA property associated to it. Few elements can achieve compliance by standard HTML itself. So never overdo your ARIA thing. That's the key important point we wanted to highlight before we start. Now, you see the diagram below, why ARIA is important and how it helps. ARIA is implemented in a web application. It is form of a HTML elements and the tagging. It helps you get all the information of the interactive elements in a DOM structure. It helps you build a relationship. It helps you build a tree so that hierarchy, linking, everything can be understood through a DOM structure. Now, many people would not know the DOM structure. DOM structure is the structure that you see on a HTML page when you inspect the entire page. It gives you the hierarchy, like how heading structures are being done, how list is being aligned, what are the hierarchy within this pages. Now, it gets very easy for a screen reader user, a user who is using assistive technology, to perceive that information when he's trying to access your application. And it's beneficial for users. So to have right ARIA, right user experience, right uh, way of perceiving the information, we need to ensure ARIA is being implemented right. As Anjali already said, we'll be sharing this presentation. You can go through the link at the bottom, which talks about all the ARIA properties, all the name, all the state, role, and properties for each and every interactive elements. Moving on to next slide. Now, what are the ARIA components? So we have three different categories, how ARIA are being detailed out. They are being detailed as role, state, and property. Now, what is role? What is its property? And what are its states? We'll be talking in upcoming slides. Moving on to next slide. What is ARIA component in terms of role? Role is when we define whether it's a landmark, whether it's a widget, whether it's a document, whether it's a live region. Every interactive element needs to have a role defined to it to understand which interactive element I am at. When I close my eyes, I need to understand, yes, this is a menu bar that you see on the screen. We have taken example from MagicA11y University, where we found that ARIA is being implemented right. So what is the role that is being done here is that they have provided role equals to menu. Now I am getting information that yes, these entire elements fall under the menu items. So it gives right information for me in terms of semantics, and I know the menu items would actually have the 4 different drop downs, and all of that can be done through a role property. Moving on to next slide. What is the state? When we say state, considering we said role was menu item, so menu item will be a list item. So the state that needs to be defined for a menu item is ARIA expanded or ARIA checked, and then ARIA expanded state is either true or false. When it is true, that means your menu item is in expanded state. When it is false, that means the drop-down menu is in collapse state. So it gives a user information that is it in open state or is it in closed state. Again, we have taken the similar example from MagicA11y University where it was being done right. Role was defined as menu and role expanded was set to false because we haven't yet expanded the menu item. Next one is properties. What exactly is properties is where we know what is the label, labeled by, what is the description, how I need to associate or perceive the information between the menu where the list items are being defined. So in this example, now I have expanded the about menu and I am at about. So it will give you information, role is menu, ARIA expanded state is true. And what is the property, which is ARIA label? What is the ARIA label? It is about. So I get information, I'm at about, which is one of the menu item, and it is in expanded state. So it gets very easy for me to understand and go through the navigation through screen reader with ease. Over
So,
to you, Vipul.
yeah, thanks, Sarvi. So, ARIA has a huge property and it's a huge list of sections. So we'll be talking about what is an accessible name, what it conveys to us, what and how and why. So any label provided for any identifier provided for any interactive elements such as the label of the button or the label for associated with the checkbox or link associated. So this is an accessible name for any interactive elements present on the web page. How they are being incorporated with the HTML. The first step is by providing the button labels, providing input for input fields, and providing sufficient label for all the edit fields. They convey the exact purpose or the natural purpose of the element so the user can understand them properly without any hesitation or without any consequences to it. How it is derived for the label, how you define a label, it is the text derived from the content. For example, if we see on the left section, there are list of items present, which is button and cell, the checkbox, grid cells, link, menu items or menu item checkbox. So there are number of list items. We have only listed some of them. For more on the learn more links, there are in the subsection provided at, you can navigate to it and you can have a list of items for all the interactive elements present that can be used to implement in HTML. And now the question arises, why do we use this ARIA accessible name? We need to make sure that the names should be accessible for every user. Every individual should be able to understand the interactive elements present on the screen. So based on overall experience, there are provided the multiple labels and accessible name for every interactive element. Moving on to the next slide.
Oh, I'm so sorry. So let's look at some benefits of ARIA. So for one, enhanced usability. So ARIA accessibility plays a crucial role in enhancing website accessibility for people with disabilities, especially those who use screen readers to navigate digital landscapes, which ensures a more inclusive environment for them. Improved navigation. So ARIA enables students to navigate digital content more effectively, providing a seamless experience for all users, ultimately allowing the student to focus more on the learning material rather than the navigation aspect. And legal compliance. So ARIA helps educational institutions comply with accessibility standards, ensuring equal access to digital learning resources.
The next poll.
Alrighty. So here we have a poll for you. The poll reads, what is the main purpose of ARIA in web development? Your first option is to enhance the visual design of web pages. Your second option is to improve the accessibility of web content for assistive technologies. Your third option is to increase the loading speed of web pages. And your fourth option is to provide SEO benefits to web pages. We'll give you a minute to go ahead and answer that. Alrighty, and all of you answered to improve the accessibility of web content for assistive technologies. Very nice. Okay. And now we'll talk about some practical implementation for ARIA.
Okay, so let's start with ARIA label because this is the most widely used, which help stabilize and have better accessibility compliance for any element. Now, why do we use ARIA label? ARIA label actually helps you define or provide a textual label for any given element. We use ARIA label when we need a concise label for buttons, form fields, and whatnot. If you see the example on the right side of the screen, we added that there is a nav. ARIA label is defined as related content, and related content is defined as H2. And then there is a list items after that navigation menu, which is ideally not right because the visual label will not be visible to the user. So it's important that the ARIA label is nav title, and then nav title has its associated label, which is related content. And then we are able to see the list items under that header. So it gets very easy for user to perceive that information. So you see at the bottom, if we define label by, it helps you give better information. because we are labeling it right and giving the right information. Similar way, if you look at the example on the left-hand side, we have added ARIA label as send button and its role is defined as button. Again, we don't need to duplicate the effort. It's always better to label and name it right. Don't overdo, because if you need to overdo, just rethink and apply ARIA described by. That we'll be talking about in the upcoming slides. Moving on to next slide. Let's talk about ARIA labeled by. ARIA labeled by works hand in hand with ARIA label. When the label is present in the content of other elements, and we are trying to associate, like ARIA label is used for specifying a custom label which is directly associated to an element. So for example, the example you see on the right side of the screen, there is a user profile menu item. Now what we have done is we have ARIA labeled as our profile heading, and then associated name, age, and occupation with ARIA labeled by, which gets easily read by screen reader. He knows that I'm at profile, at user profile. User profile is associated, labeled as profile heading, and then all the required fields are associated to user profile menu. It gives the information, representation, and relationship between the elements in the form field and the main header. Moving on to next slide. ARIA described by. Now, as I already talked about ARIA described by, it helps you give information on an element where you want to detail it out with the additional description that why it is important and why we are planning to detail it out. For example, again, we'll pick up the same example we picked up last, that there is a user profile item. We have used ARIA labeled as profile heading, but I want to describe the profile description. Now my profile description is, this is a user profile section. It contains information about user name, age, and occupation. Now I'm detailing out further so that it's easy for user to perceive and have the right set of information, that this is required and this is a mandatory information, and I need to add user name, age, and occupation just after the heading, which is user profile. Moving on to next slide. Over to you, Vipul.
Thanks, Tarveen. So we'll be talking about the ARIA Live, when to use the ARIA Live. ARIA Live is used to notify user for any dynamic content, such as the stock market keeps on updating, or is there any pop-up suddenly that appears on the screen. So when the content is keep on changing, we define ARIA Live. For this section, defining ARIA Live is defined in two properties. First one is assertive and second one is polite. Assertive is used to identify to make sure that user gets to know the sudden announcement or the immediate response that is required from the user at the stop point. Now, polite is used to announce by the screen reader, same live announcement. It is for both the things, without interrupting the flow of the user navigation or user reading out any content. So this is the example for ARIA Live, which is defined in assertive and polite. Now we have an example for the code, how it is used. For example, if we have a div which contains an ARIA Live, which is defined in assertive property. Now this content will be immediately announced it whenever the changes appears on the screen, which is the immediate effect of the assertive nature. Now for the polite part, this content will be announced at the next available opportunity. For example, if the user is in the flow and we want to notify any update for a small window pop-up, but it is not that important, then we'll be using ARIA Live property. Now, how the screen reader will be announcing that? If there is a change occurs in the assertive region, the screen reader will interrupt the entire flow or the current speech to announce that update immediately. Now, for the polite region, the screen reader will wait for an appropriate pause. If there is a flow in the speech, then it will be announcing after the flow has been completed, the update if it is required for the user to know. Now, when not to use this property, because there are multiple sections where we will be providing at, whenever there is a static content present on the page, such as any of the dynamically, non-dynamically content, it may lead to unnecessary announcements. Below we'll be having a learn more link where you can reach out and have an expanded section of the ARIA Live property. Now moving on to the next slide. So ARIA expanded, when it is used to announce the screen readers, there is any expanded section or collapse section present on the web page. There are values for ARIA expanded is again as similar to ARIA hidden, which we'll be talking about in the next slides. It is true and false. When ARIA expanded is set to true, it indicates that the screen reader will be announcing that it is expanded or it is in visible state. For the false condition, it will be announcing as collapse or the hidden state. The main purpose of this using is to make sure that user gets a proper information about any property used, any interactive property, expanded property is being used on the web page. Now in the left panel section, we have an example of toggle button where it will be announcing as the toggle. It is in the code you can see the ARIA expanded is provided as false. Now this is provided in a button tag. When this will be experienced by the screen reader, it will be announcing at toggle button collapse state. Now when we'll be clicking it and accessing or enter the tab to it, the announcement will be changed to expanded. Screen reader will be announcing that as toggle button expanded. Now in this situation, the ARIA expanded will be dynamically changes to true in the HTML part. After using it, when not to use this ARIA property, we should not be using for all the non-collapsible items or all the non-expandable items it may lead to unnecessary complexity of the content. We have a reference link provided in the below, and you can give an approach to understand more about ARIA expanded. Moving on to the next slide. ARIA hidden, as we have spoken about the ARIA hidden, it is similarly to true and false condition. When to use this ARIA hidden property? It is whenever the screen reader, it is supposed to hide from screen reader users. If there is any content that screen reader we should be hiding from them, will be using the ARIA hidden property. So when ARIA hidden is set to true, it indicates that it is hidden from the screen reader users. Or when the false condition is in active state, it means that the content is considered to be visible and the screen reader will be announcing it to the screen reader users. And in the left panel section, we have a span tag, which is far tweet. For this part, we have, this is not the part where the screen reader is supposed to read. So for that, what we have done is we have provided the ARIA hidden set to true. This way, this will be hidden from the screen reader users, but it will be visible for on the screen for the normal users. Now, for when class label is set as tweet, this is a visual label provided for assistive technology in this part. Now, when not to use this ARIA property, we do not use for any essential content, because if there is an essential content present and after using this, again, this will be like it is hiding from screen reader users. And elements that are interactive and provide functionality to users, such as buttons, links, form elements, we should not be using ARIA hidden property here. Moving on to the next slide. ARIA has pop-up. ARIA has pop-up has a expanded state, and it is a very huge property to use it. We will be using this for many number of items. For example, menu, list box, any tree item or the grid item, or for the any dialog, because this indicates that the any content will be having a pop-up menu attached to it. So when ARIA has pop-up is set to true, it indicates that the screen reader will be perceiving this content as a pop-up or a menu, whichever role is being associated to the element. Now, for example, in this left panel section, we have a favorite fruit, it's a drop-down section where number of fruit items will be present in the drop-down. For this, we'll be providing as has pop-up. It means that this will be the expanded will be conditioned as false, and ARIA has pop-up is set to list box. In this, the screen reader will be announcing it as choose fruit button menu press space to activate the menu. Then navigate with arrow keys is the navigation structure for screen reader users. Now, when to use this? Is there any dynamic or visually hidden content which has a pop-up associated with the element? Then we will be using this ARIA has pop-up property. Or when an element on a web page triggers any appearance of any pop-up, or it opens any button which opens a drop-down, then we'll be using this ARIA has pop-up property. So if there is no element which does not require any pop-up or triggering or any appearance of menu, we should be avoiding using the ARIA has pop-up. Moving on to the next slide. So there are multiple perceived screen reader announcement, how the screen reader is announcing for various state of the ARIA has pop-up property. So for example, the first part is the favorite food, fruit, which has a drop down of choose a fruit, and there are a number of list items present in it. And this is in the default collapse state. So in this part, the properties we'll be using is ARIA expanded is set to false, ARIA has pop-up is set to list box, and ARIA owns is the list box ID. Now in this part, the screen reader will be announcing it as choose a fruit button, menu, press space to activate the menu, then navigation with the arrow keys is followed by within it. Moving on to the next part, if the drop-down has been opened and the user has on the first focus of the element, the first focus of the expanded element of the drop-down menu. In this part, the properties ARIA properties that are being used is ARIA expanded, which is set to true as the dropdown has opened, and ARIA has pop-up again is the list box as it is defined in the list box. Then ARIA owns as a list box ID. So in this part, the screen reader will parse this as choose fruit button menu expanded list box. Now here the screen reader has announced as the expanded state of the drop-down menu. Now, once the dropdown has been expanded, we have a list of items present to it and we'll be navigating using arrow keys. Now you have a section where apple is present for the choose a fruit item. For this, when apple is selected, now here, if dropdown has opened and you have selected an item from the dropdown, the ARIA label is used in this part, which is choose fruit, apple, multiple names, mango, banana, multiple names are provided to it. For example, we have a list of 8 items. The screen reader will be announcing this as choose fruit list with 8 items as there are a number of 8 items present within the dropdown. Now, moving on to the favorite fruit which you have selected after you have expanded. Now you have selected an apple, which is your favorite. Let's say you have an apple, which is favorite to it. You have selected from the dropdown. So here the role it is defined as option, which because there are many options present on the dropdown. For this, ARIA selected will be using as true. When this is set to true, this means that the screen reader will be parsing this as this apple has been selected from the dropdown. Now, how this will be announced by the screen reader? It is choose fruit list with 8 items, apple selected 1 of 8. To change the selection, press up or down arrow key. What happens here is the user gets to know that there are a number of items present on the screen and you have selected 1 of 8. So this way, the screen reader users perceive the information from all the, for all the web elements or interactive elements using ARIA properties. Moving on to the next slide.
I just wanted to add here, I think Vipul has covered it really well. But as you see on this table, the ARIA properties that are being defined here, we haven't overused them. We have tried to retain the core message that is required, that use the right set of property. Don't use everything. You don't need to use ARIA labeled by, described by, to like favorite fruit is XYZ and whatnot. Just use the right set of ARIA properties, and these are the core properties for a list item, menu item with the drop down as a list. And similar way, you will have different ARIA properties to be used for radio buttons, for the multiple choice questions, and for any kind of interactive content, even for a play pause button. So it's important for us to analyze, build up a relation, what exactly I want my screen reader user to perceive, and whatever I'm trying to achieved? Is it meeting the compliance? For example, people end up using ARIA hidden unnecessary, which is actually not required. We have seen at multiple instances while performing the audits that there are multiple sections on a given page which is marked as ARIA hidden. It's not the right way to get the information hidden for a user. If it's not required, just remove that, but don't unnecessarily use that. Any tool, automation tool that you will end up using, it will first give you error messages of unnecessary usage of ARIA hidden. So only use the right set of properties at right instance. Thank you, Vipul. Over to you, Anjali.
Alrighty, I think we have another poll. So this poll reads, how does ARIA labeled by attribute function differently from the ARIA label attribute? So your first option is ARIA labeled by is used to hide content from screen readers, while ARIA label is not. Your second option is ARIA labeled by provides a reference to another element that labels the current element, while ARIA label provides a string directly. Your third option is ARIA labeled by is used for defining regions, while ARIA label is for labeling buttons. And your fourth option is ARIA labeled by can be used only for form elements, while ARIA label can be used for all HTML elements. We'll give you a minute to go ahead and answer that. Alrighty. And it looks like everyone who answered ARIA labeled by provides a reference to another element that labels the current element, while ARIA label provides a string directly. Alrighty. So now moving on. ARIA usage, when to and when not to. So when to use ARIA. Enhancing native HTML elements. So we want to use ARIA to add extra semantic information to the elements when native HTML does not provide the needed role, state, or property. Custom widgets. So apply ARIA roles, states, and properties to custom UI components to ensure that they are accessible, like buttons and sliders. Dynamic content. So use ARIA to update assistive technologies with changes in the DOM, especially for dynamic or single page applications. Examples for this are ARIA Live for live regions. And keyboard navigation. So all interactive ARIA controls must be usable with a keyboard. And at the bottom, you can see that we have a link to the W3C ARIA authoring practices if you would like more information on those. And when not to use ARIA. So native HTML elements, apologies. Avoid using ARIA when native HTML elements provide the required semantics and accessibility features. So if they have button instead of div role equals button. Redundant information. Do not use ARIA to provide redundant information that has already been conveyed by the native HTML element. Incorrect usage. So don't use role equals presentation or ARIA hidden equals true on a focusable element. And decorative elements. So we don't need to use ARIA for decorative elements. Charveen, is there anything you'd like to add for these portions?
No, I think I already covered while Vipul was giving the example. Yes, it's right. Don't overdo. Don't use role equals to presentation. I have seen at many instances, people are using role equals to presentation. It is only required when there is any technical limitation that can't be like overdone with the HTML and the right set of ARIA. Just be at the right place. Just ensure you are not overdoing the job. As it's always said that if you try to overanalyze the data, you'll end up doing the analysis that you are trying to achieve. So similar thing applies to ARIA. So that's one thing that we need to keep in mind while we start working on the ARIA properties. And I know it is very complex topic and no one can learn in a day or in an hour. It's a long journey for everyone, even for me when I started a decade ago. it was a bit complex, but when you get it started, you know what I'm doing wrong and what I'm doing right. So it's always to, once you have, I don't know what is the user profile, the people who have joined, but if you are an engineer who is doing the development, implement ARIA and use it with the screen reader. And then just close your eyes and try to perceive, am I getting the right information, whatever I'm seeing with my eyes. That's very important. While you are doing the actual coding is when you get to know, is ARIA being done right or not. Otherwise, your tester will come and tell you that you haven't done anything right. All of this needs to be done. Can we redo? Can we do it again? Can we do whatever is required to make sure it is compliant? So compliance comes with the ARIA implementation, especially for all the interactive elements.
Thank you for that, Tarveen.
Thank you.
Alrighty, and now we have one final poll for everyone. So this poll reads, which ARIA attribute would you use to indicate that an element is being updated dynamically? So your first option is ARIA Live, your second option is ARIA Label, your third option is ARIA Labeled By, and your fourth option is ARIA Described By. Alrighty. And we had most people that said ARIA Live. We had one person that said ARIA Label and two people that said ARIA Labeled By.
So ARIA label and labeled by is not used where we are trying to give information on dynamically updated content. ARIA Live is like we are enabling the user to get the notification of live updates. That's how dynamic content is being done. So right tagging for ARIA for dynamic content is ARIA Live. Now, whether you want to use assertive or polite depends on type of content or type of information you want to convey to user.
Alrighty, and last but certainly not least, top 6 mistakes to avoid. So using ARIA as a last resort, don't unnecessarily use ARIA label. Built-in HTML semantics are always better. Don't create your own ARIA attribute, so only use the ones defined by ARIA. Use ARIA labeled by with an ID when you have content that wraps divs and you want to group sections. Use ARIA described by when you have sections that need more descriptions. Parent role without children. For example, when menu or menu bar roles are defined without expected menu items from children roles and related objects. Children roles without parent roles, and for example, a tab role might be defined without its tab list parent role. So these are some mistakes that we want to avoid when using ARIA. Go ahead, Tarveen, it looks like you were about to say something.
Yes. So last 2 points are very important points that Anjali covered. Child and parent relationship and parent and child relationship. This will actually impact your DOM structure that we talked in slide 1. So it's important to build up a tree structure that what is my parent, what is my children, and how the different elements on the screen are connected. If this relationship is not being done right, then your DOM structure will not convey the required information. So there are keyboard shortcuts that enable user to just traverse through the heading and help him understand that where are we on the page. So it's important to ensure the last 2 points, and it's very critical to have compliance with these.
Thank you, Tarveen. That's really helpful information. Alrighty, we'll go into our Q&A now. Let's see. Doesn't look like we have any questions so far. So if you have any questions that you've thought of throughout the session or in relation to ARIA, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A box.
And hope you like the session, and we'll be soon publishing the next webinar date on our MagicA11y LinkedIn channel. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And all the best with ARIA.
On that same note, we're always open to suggestions for Magically Live topics. So if there's anything that you would like to see, absolutely drop us an email and we would love to create a session around it. All right. Well, if no one has any questions, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking the time and have a good rest of your week. And thank you.
Bye-bye.
Congrats on your first Magically Live.